This is Bean to Barstool, a podcast that looks at the intersections of craft chocolate, craft beer, and other artisan drinks. My name is David Nilsson. I'm a professional drinks writer, an advanced cicerone, the author of Pairing Beer and Chocolate, and the creator and host of this show. The music for this episode is by my dear friend, indie folk musician Anna P.S. You can find out more about Anna's music in the show notes or on annapsmusic.com. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool. That's Dorothy Neary of NearyNogs Chocolate in Northern Ireland. NearyNogs makes some amazing bars that are influenced and informed by ingredients and flavors from Irish culture. I've never been to Ireland, but I feel like I could travel there just by tasting these bars and listening to the descriptions that Dorothy gives for them. In our conversation for this episode, Dorothy and I talk about the beautiful natural landscape that surrounds their chocolate factory, a landscape that has not only influenced how they make chocolate, but has provided some of the ingredients for it. We also talk about the role of Irish whiskey, not only in Irish culture, but in several of the bars that Dorothy and the team make at NearyNogs. We talk about pairing with whiskey, and we even discuss the influence of Irish music on some of their bars. I know you'll enjoy this conversation with Dorothy, so we'll get right to it. At the outset, I asked her to explain the name NearyNogs.
Neary is our surname. It's my husband's family's surname. And Nogs it's an Irish word, and it would actually be pronounced Nogs because of the fada over the O. And it's a spin-off of Celtic mythology, a place called NearyNog. And it's a place where like everyone is ever young, and it's like happy and lovely. And my husband Shane, his dad used to tell stories to Shane and his sister when they were little about this place called NearyNogs, and it was the land of ever young. And so when we were trying to think of a business name, Shane's dad said, well, everybody in the family called our family, our kids and ourselves, the NearyNogs. So that's how it happened, and it stuck.
That's great. And you're NearyNogs Stone Ground Chocolate. Can you explain a little bit on the Stone Ground? What is it you're doing uniquely for your process?
Yes, so we had originally called ourselves NearyNogs Stone Ground Chocolate. Now we kind of just say NearyNogs Chocolate Makers. And the reason why is because Stone Ground is because we use melangers, and the melangers have this granite stone inside. So we thought this made sense to us. But now I find that a lot of people have this expectation that because the chocolate is stone ground, then it won't be smooth at all, which is like an urban myth. I suppose it's an education point maybe, or a talking point. It's a good talking point, that's for sure. So now we tend to just say chocolate makers, because when we say stone ground chocolate, people are like, what is that?
Yeah. I wonder if they're expecting like onomatate or something like that when they hear that.
I think that people that don't know much about chocolate, they relate stone ground as to something like, like stone ground flour that's milled.
Mm-hmm.
So they have this idea that it would be like more like the consistency of like a bit like milled grains,
Yeah.
and oats and stuff. So that maybe not the ideal scenario.
Yeah, that makes sense. Share a little bit about your cacao sourcing. How are you going about getting your different origins?
So we go about sourcing our cacao. Oftentimes we go through the likes of Albert from crafting markets. So we get Thailand in, and that comes in. Don't know if you know Ryan Burke from Parliament Chocolate, but he is putting Thailand on the map. A lot of chocolate makers use Thai cacao beans. The people that are there are amazing, beautiful people. So that's one origin. We have Ecuador. We use a couple different origins and from Ecuador, and the reason why that's happened is because, as you well know, cacao is harder to get, and it's been, I don't know what's the right word, it's been not just harder to get, but it's like the quantities you used to be able to get, like we could have reserved like 1 ton or 2 tons or 3 tons or 4 tons. But now it's like if you can get a 1 ton reserve in, then you were
Mm.
lucky for that particular harvest. So now we have to be careful because, or be wiser. I don't know, whichever you prefer, both actually, because it's if we have Ecuador in and we like this origin, now we kind of like go, okay, well, we're not going to use that in our chef's chocolate, the Ecuador, because maybe the chefs like Nicaragua more. So we probably are more careful with how we allot it. We used Togo cocoa beans for a long time. There's a woman at Origin called Abra, and it's a lovely story because it's a woman-owned co-op. And so she helped other women to get little bits of like a plantation, their own little crop part. And it helps boost their economy, but it changed the dynamic of their area. Women having their own cacao, women having their own money, women growing and harvesting, fermenting everything, processing it. So that was a different dynamic for them. So I'm really proud of that because then also that money goes to help supporting a small like forest school there and school supplies and things like that. So that's really important to us. When we get in new origins, obviously we taste test. We get samples set in. We do have, obvious standards. Everything has to be fully traceable, ethically and sustainably sourced. We need to know who's the farmers, who is working there, and who is their processes as well is very important.
We'll talk more in just a minute about some of your different inclusions that you use, but when you are planning inclusion bars, are you selecting specific origins to work with those, or do you have a standard base chocolate that you use when you're using inclusions?
Definitely, we have a like Ecuador for me, I think works really well, especially if you're carrying flavors. Do you know if you like our Dulamon bar, it has gorse flour and seaweed in it. If it would, we tried it once with a very fruity chocolate, like a Madagascar, and it wasn't nice. It was like a clash, do you know? So we thought we need to we do a lot of pairings in here in our work, actually, not just with flavors, but with local businesses and stuff. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what will go with other things and tasting the origins that we have in. If somebody sends us a bean sample and we go, I really like that, do you know, I might have like a clever idea and go, oh, I know what this is going to go amazing with. Yeah, it's a lot of hit and miss. I remember once we used, I think it was a Dominican, and it had quite a strong raisiny flavor to it.
Mm.
And somebody, a chef, had asked, could they get some peppermint chef's chocolate? And I was like, oh no, it's every chocolate maker's worst nightmare to put peppermint in your chocolate because peppermint is such a funny thing to mix in with other things, and it's very hit or miss. And anyways, I happened to have Dominican, and I thought I'll try it in here, but I'll see. And actually, it was like the worst thing ever. So now we don't do that anymore.
Well,
So,
you are making chocolate in a really beautiful corner of the world. Can you share a little bit
oh,
about
thanks.
kind of the natural setting around where you are for those of us, listening from other places?
So our chocolate factory is nestled on the side of the Mourne Mountains, and we're right near Carlingford Lough. So you can actually see Carlingford Lough from the chocolate factory. When you look out, you actually see the Cooley Mountains, which is over in a little place called Carlingford. We've got the loch here, got the Irish Sea. We've got gorse flowers all around us. So we try to use a lot of local flavors and inspirations that way. We can see the sunsets, the sunrises. We've got the sea so close, the mountains right here. So a lot of people stop here and maybe will tend to stop in here, have a coffee, hot chocolate, get some chocolate from the chocolate factory, taste testing things, and then they might wander off the road, up the road,
Mm.
and go have a nice scenic walk up our road from the chocolate factory. It's a lovely viewpoint. So you can see all like you can just see for miles and miles,
Yeah,
mountains and sea.
that sounds beautiful. A lot of that is reflected, as I understand it, in your bar mold. You've kind of tried to put some of that natural scenery on there. Can you walk us through a couple details of that mold?
Yeah, so that was a tricky one. We worked on that for a really long time with some very fabulous artists, Dara and Steve Dugan. We wanted something that felt and looked kind of from our area here, but also to incorporate the fact that the cocoa beans come to us. They sail here. So we thought, what can we do? So on our logo, that's what we have on our bar. You've got the waves, you've got little trees, you've got like the mountain and like rain pattern on one side, and on the other
Mm.
side is like the mountain kind of pattern. You've got the sun that is sitting to I don't know if it would be your left or my left, but it's one or the other. The sun is setting there. And actually, in the summertime, that is exactly where the sun sets, to the side of the mountain. So it's pretty cool like that. There's a bit of seaweed there, and it's just partly that feel like it's really where we are at, localized, and also things that are really important to us. I think in our free time, you will either find us up a mountain or in the sea.
I love bar molds and logos that are really evocative and help tell a story like that. That's really neat. Let's talk about some of the bars that are using some of those ingredients that you mentioned. You just talked about the
Okay.
Doulamon bar with gorse and seaweed. First of all, talk a little bit about the significance of both of those ingredients locally, and then share a little bit about how you're using them in the bar.
Well, we live in Ireland, and a long time ago there was, I shouldn't say a long time ago. There's still a band called Clannad. It's an
Mm-hmm.
Irish band. They have a lot of history and they're amazing musicians. And they sang a song called the Doulamon, and I won't sing it for you, but you can look it up. And the Doulamon translates from Irish to English, and it talks about the seaweed gatherers. Locally here, they would have gathered seaweed here in Carlingford Lough. When we listened to that song, we thought it's a part of music is a really big part of Ireland. It's a big part of where we live and who we are as people and storytelling. And I was listening to the song and I thought, I just felt like I need to make a bar out of this. And obviously, because our chocolate factory is between the mountains and the sea, and almost all of our hedges, you'll find, especially this time of year, it's like gold hedges everywhere. Like the side of the mountains just that gold. And in the autumn time, it's all purple with heather. So it's very seasonal. And actually, in old Celtic mythology, the gorse flower was there to remind us that the sun will shine again, because in the winter it can be very dark here, and we're on an island and the weather just changes all the time. So I thought this would pair really well with the seaweed. So I'm the seaweed gatherer now, so I gather the seaweed. Different people in work, and including myself, we gather the gorse flowers, not on windy days because it comes on these bushes that have very prickly thorns on them, so I have to be careful. But we thought this would pair really well. The yellow flowers on the bar go gorgeous with the green seaweed, and it's a nice flavor. I don't really feel like when the gorse flowers are dry, I don't really feel like you pull a strong coconutty kind of flavor off them. And because we don't use artificial flavors, so we just put, there's some gorse flower on there. I don't think it lends a strong flavor as such. We've tried, what do you call it, when you like submerge it in the chocolate, and then we've sieved it off, but I think it gets lost in the dark chocolate.
Sure.
But it's okay. The point of the bar is that it's for the seas and the mountains. So
I love.
We'll be right back.
Getting a Cicerone certification can be a game changer for your beer career, but how are you supposed to find the time to prep, and how do you know what and how much to study? When I was preparing for my Cicerone certification, I used the Beer Scholars study guides. The Beer Scholar currently offers efficient online courses for levels 1 and 2 of the Cicerone program that cover everything you need to know and contain tips and tricks for how to pass the exams, and include live weekly Zooms to taste and discuss classic beer styles together. They even have a new coaching program for level 3, Advanced Cicerone, that I really wish had been around when I was preparing for that exam. The majority of certified Cicerones in the world today have used Beer Scholar to help achieve their goals. If you're ready to level up your beer career, visit thebeerscholar.com to check out their online courses. I'll link to that in the show notes. Now, back to our episode. Yeah, I'm familiar with that band. I have one of their albums on vinyl, and
Oh, do you?
yeah,
Amazing.
and they were an inspiration for another band that I used to listen to called Iona, from
Oh, yes.
Ireland. Yeah, so that's interesting.
I met the last year, the year before, I can't remember. We have something on every summer here called Fiddler's Green, and all musicians from all over the world and especially all over Ireland come. And your woman from Planet was there, and she was singing up front. And I gave her that bar, and I
Mm.
just was like, this is like an epic moment for me. So that
Yeah,
was
that's
amazing.
amazing. That's what Marie Brennan or
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's wonderful. Are there other bars where music or some other type of art was an inspiration to you when you're trying to come up with those flavors?
Yeah, like our saltwater days bar. I know a lot of people put salt in chocolate. When we don't, I feel like we don't, especially the past few years, we don't get a lot of sunny days. So I thought, we do a lot of whiskey tasting and pairing, and sometimes when you're smelling a lot of whiskey, it evokes ideas and thoughts. When we our Ecuador chocolate always makes me feel like you're getting a warm hug when it's in the melanger,
Mm.
and there's a banana note in there, and it's kind of caramelly, and I just feel like it's like a hug from a really lovely granny or something. But I was down at the beach one day and I thought, I just wish I could put this day in a bar somehow. So, when you leave the beach, you always find sand somewhere, so it's like
Hmm.
reminiscence of you were definitely at the beach because you found sand. So on our saltwater days bars, there I ground up some cocoa nibs and put that on the bar. And then there's gold dust because when you leave the beach and even while you're still there, everything feels sunshiny and golden and happy. And then there's sea sultans from Echo Island, which is actually on the other side of our island here in Ireland, but it's such great salt. So we put that on the bar because when you leave the beach, you can taste salt on your lip and you're like, I've been at the beach, and you just feel happy inside. So that's our saltwater days bar. And then we have another bar called Lunasa. And Lunasa is actually an Irish word for the month of August. And the month of August, the end of August, is when I harvest the lavender that goes into that bar. We don't pick it when it's very green and in full flower. We wait till it kind of starts to close a wee bit. And also, there's a festival here in Ireland called the Lunasa Festival, and it happens the end of August.
I love the contrast because cacao, of course, obviously is a tropical ingredient, being grown
Yes.
near the equator and finding ways for it to work so beautifully with these more northern seaside ingredients from Ireland. It's interesting, kind of the story that tells of the contrast between those, and yet the flavors work so well together.
Yeah, it is amazing because I think, we do a lot of chocolate factory tours here, and you get people that come in and they'll say, "Oh, I'm not really a dark chocolate person, but I'm happy to try chocolate." And by the time they've finished their tour and they've tasted all this chocolate, they're usually blown away because, first of all, they didn't know that chocolate could have so many flavors. And then when we explain to them, it's because of terroir. It's because some chocolate that grows in Madagascar tastes like this. Chocolate that grows in Thailand tastes like this. And even chocolate say that even cacao beans, that you get in from one plantation and then further south in another plantation can just taste so differently. And then when we talk about, you know, the way it's harvested and fermented, and even the way it's dried, and then when we get it here and how it's roasted and what way it's in the melangers, or if it's in, if you put it in a ball mill, or, however you process it, it's going to make it taste different. So you can have 20 makers all with the same beans from the same exact spot, and you mightn't find
Mm.
that any two are the exact same, which I just think is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Backing up briefly to the Dulaman bar again, tell me about gathering seaweed. That's not something I've ever done. Do you have to wade out into the water to do this? Like, what's involved in gathering that?
Yes, the seaweed that we get is it's local to us, and it's just down at the beach. I usually pick it when the water, I don't want to, not when it's high tide, but when, yes, I wade into the water. So I prefer to pick it in the summertime as much as I can because the water isn't just so sharp. And when you get water down in your welly boots, it's like, oh, it's very cold. So I pick here I just call it sea lettuce, and then there's bladderwrack, and then there's a few other seaweeds sometimes we pick. Um, just pick it out of the sea and then bring it home, give it a good rinse off. And when the weather permits, then I would hang it up to dry
Mm.
for a bit outside because it's where we're at the side of a mountain, it's quite windy. So I'm sure that sometimes when visitors come, they probably look around and go, this is unusual. What is all that blowing around there? And then usually just to finalize it, I take it in and we put it in the oven to finish drying it. And then we sort through it all. It gets dry. Then we ground it down. So this is often a inside joke in our chocolate factory. I can come back with what seems like a lot of seaweed and then we dry it. And then as it's getting ground down, we just use a pestle and mortar and we pick through it. We go, what happened to all the seaweed? Didn't you pick loads of seaweed? Oh, yes, we did. Well, how did you end up with the amount that's
Yeah.
like, less than like 100 grams? And you go, I know, because it's like powder.
Right.
So we also try to be careful when we're grinding it, not to grind it down to a powder because it can go so fine so fast. Other seaweed is a little bit harder to work with. When it gets dry, you have to cut it before you dry it because it's so tough. I tend not to use that kind of seaweed anymore because when chocolate leaves your mouth, I don't want seaweed left behind in your mouth because then local people here would say things like, that's not really my favorite. So
And what kind of flavors does seaweed impart to the chocolate bar?
a lot of people use the word umami. It's more savory. I know I'm happy with the seaweed when I'm picking it because I tend to nibble it sometimes when I'm picking it. I also always save some to use in my own cooking. So I would put it in things like our mashed potatoes. I put it in our salads. It's a really rich nutrient food. So we use it a lot here.
Well, two of the flavors from Ireland that we are most familiar with here in North America are Irish whiskey and then
Yeah.
Irish coffee made with it. And you make bars celebrating both of those. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the old fashioned bar. Share a little bit about the concept behind it, and then we'll talk about the process as well.
Okay, well, my confession is one of my favorite cocktails is the old fashioned cocktail, which has Irish whiskey in it, orange bitters, burnt sugar. Sometimes people put like a bit of honeycomb in it, or they might put like an orange slice in it, and then muddle it around, with put an ice cube in it, or not, maybe you just have it neat. But it's one of my favorite cocktails, and we have some of the most phenomenal whiskey makers here in Ireland, obviously. And very near us, we have Cologne Distillery, which actually just won like the best craft whiskey in the world. So that's a really big deal. So I got some whiskey from them. A lot of people I think tend to make their, when people put whiskey in chocolate, they tend to soak the nibs and then dehydrate them off
Mhm.
and then they're left with kind of like the flavor of whiskey and then they put it in the melanger and then it grinds down, but I just felt like I found that the heat of the melanger took away more of the whiskey aroma than what I wanted it to.
Mhm.
So against better judgment, I just put the cocoa nibs straight into the melanger, and when I put the cocoa nibs in the melanger with the sugar, I put some Irish whiskey into the melanger. And I wouldn't recommend everyone to do that because you might get in trouble with your
Yeah.
people. And it's something that you shouldn't do all the time. It's not meant for that. But because the heat of it at the time, it just works. I can't really explain why it works, the science of it, but
How do you
um,
avoid the chocolate seizing? That's been always been my understanding, is that adding the liquid will cause it to seize. Are you just adding it in extremely small amounts?
small amounts and slowly. And I do it when the nibs are going in. I don't, to be honest, I don't know. I thought it would seize up, and maybe it's just because I added it in really small amounts. But then even at the end of stage, after that the chocolate is made and then I'm making the bars, I always put an extra cap full of whiskey into the tempering chocolate before when it's hot, when I've melted it down now,
Mhm.
remelted it. And I don't know why it doesn't seize up, but I think it's because the high alcohol content. And I only put a little bit in at a time, but it just works.
I was just recently talking with Tandy Peterson at Embers Chocolate, and she also adds some back at the end at tempering. And she said up to about 3% by volume will still incorporate at that point. And then beyond that, she starts to run into trouble. So it looks like just using those very small controlled
Yeah,
amounts. When you're
yeah.
adding it in the melanger, you said you're doing it at the very beginning. So, right when you're adding the nibs, you're adding in the whiskey?
So the nibs go in, and we do, I say a scooper at a time. And after the melange is probably about halfway loaded with nibs, not sugar, then I tend to slowly add it in while I'm still adding the nibs in. I've never had it seize up. Now we don't make it like we don't make old fashioned in the melangers every day. Obviously because we only have so many melangers and we have other chocolate to make. But I've never had a problem, and I don't really. I always say, we have a saying here, touch wood. I've never had a problem.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that is different from the way most people do it. That's interesting. How about the bitters? Are you doing that at the same time, or when are you incorporating that?
I don't do the orange bitters at that same time. I put the orange bitters in when I add the sugar in. And also, again, just a few drops at a time. Very slow. Everything is slow. And I think that's kind of the beauty of when you're a chocolate maker. Everything you can do a little drop and more drops and then a few more drops. And then you're standing there watching it because you're hot sweating it going, please work.
Yeah. And then you also do the Irish coffee bar. Tell us a little bit about the process behind that.
Yep. So that's kind of on the same principle. Irish coffee is it's a thing here. It's on most every menu. If you've eaten your dinner in a restaurant or somewhere, an Irish coffee is going to be on the menu. It's probably in the majority of most pubs here. It's a very common drink. People love it. And so, and we talked about it for a long time, and I thought, I'm just going to do it. So I basically did on the same pretense that I do the old fashioned. And I thought, well, the old fashioned works. So I don't know why that wouldn't work. The only difference, obviously, is I'm adding coffee into it. We have a cafe out front here. So we use the coffee on the bar. It grinds the grinder machine thing, whatever it's called. I'm not a barista. Don't just, I'm a chocolate maker, but not a
Sure.
barista. But I know how to like tamp the coffee out or whatever you
Mhm.
call it. I'm going to not say it. I'm going to offend people here, but it's because it's such a niche thing. But you weigh out so much coffee, and I have it written down, but I'm terrible with numbers. So if I have recipes, and so I have to go back to those. And obviously, I'm the kind of person that I'll add so much because I had a bad experience one time where I was adding coffee beans, and I just added the coffee beans as they were into something, and the whole inside of the back of the chocolate factory smelled like a cup of espresso. And I thought, oh no, what am I going to do here? Because, once you add something in, you can't take it back out.
Right.
You had to be careful. So I didn't do that this time. I measured out ground coffee and put it in at the same time as I did the cocoa nibs and the sugar. And again, I just poured whiskey into the melanger and said a wee prayer that everything will be okay. And it worked. And actually, I think I was probably just as amazed that it worked because you hear people tell stories and you worry like, oh God, please don't let that be me because I don't want to have to put a picture up on the well-tempered post to say, look what bad thing I did. But it worked and it tasted good. I think when it was getting after it'd been in for about 24 hours, we decided that it could use a little bit more whiskey and a little bit more coffee. And we wanted to keep it vegan. And the only reason why, I'll be honest, is because we'd also had another small business up the road, and they had said, would we make some bars of the Irish coffee for them? But preferably, could we keep it vegan? And we've worked with all kinds of like milk alternatives in here. But oat, you get like an oaty flavor to it.
Mhm.
If you use coconut, you get a coconutty flavor. And neither of those are going to work too well in an Irish coffee. So we went back to the Ecuador because it tends to throw a creamy note in it. And people often say, does that have milk in it? And we go, no. And they go, but it tastes like it has milk in it, like cream in it. And you go, well, no. And so I thought this is actually going to be perfect for this bar. So we used that, and that was how our Irish coffee bar was made. We used local Bailey's coffee. We used Cologne whiskey, and our chocolate, our cacao.
That's great. Have you had the chance to share those bars with the folks at Killiman?
Yeah, Cologne loves that bar. That's one of their favorites. They travel a lot with whiskey, so sometimes they take those bars with them. Like as gift, Bailey's coffee at Christmas time. We did a corporate gift box for them, and some of those bars went in there. Yeah, so it's good. I love
Yeah.
collaboration.
You mentioned earlier the opportunity to do some pairings and things with whiskey. I'm very curious, anything that you'd like to share about, what you've learned from doing different pairings with your bars, any favorites or guidelines or things like that you've developed?
I think a lot of it goes down to taking time. Take your time. Definitely take your time. It goes back to the basics of, smelling your chocolate, smelling what you're pairing it with. We've done chocolate pairings with a local beer companies, whiskey distilleries, a number of whiskey distilleries, a moonshine company in up in Basque Country near Bilbao. We've done cheese pairings, chocolate and cheese, different desserts. Somebody asked us once to pair chocolate with their like hot salsas,
Oh, wow.
hot sauces. So that was interesting.
That's not one I've heard before. How did
No,
that go?
it was really good, but it was also kind of tricky because I like spice, but I don't like things too hot. And also, even like I think it's harder sometimes. Like I'm not really a beer person myself. I prefer spirits over beer.
Mhm.
And when we did the beer pairings, I actually was like hot sweaty going, oh gosh, this is going to be tricky because I'm not a big fan of beer. But I think when you take your time and you slow down on anything, it
Mhm.
gives your palate time to actually taste things you hadn't noticed before. And also it's nice because I think when you do pairings, everybody kind of like slows down, gets into like a Zen mode of like they're focusing their palate on what they're tasting. And and it's little things like closing your eyes or letting something warm up in your mouth. Yeah, it just makes the experience different. And oftentimes we have people that come here for pairings and they would say things like, I don't think I've ever even tasted my wine like this or tasted my
Mm.
whiskey like this or a chocolate, So yeah, it's not just savoring what you're eating, but it's savoring your time and your moments. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I love that about pairing in general, that just the process of needing to pay attention to another element kind of shifts your perspective, even on a thing you're already familiar with. So
Yeah.
trying to pair it, even if you already know this wine or this chocolate or whatever it is, pairing it with something else, it kind of
Yeah.
makes you see it with new eyes because you have to combine it and see it in this new perspective.
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, you may have noticed things in the world aren't awesome right now, and social media kind of reflects that. I built a lot of the following for Bean to Barstool and just for my own writing career on Instagram, but I've been getting significantly lower returns in terms of engagement on Instagram, and well, some of their recent changes don't have me thrilled for the future. So, here are some ways to keep up with Bean to Barstool if Instagram and other social media platforms don't prove to be long-term viable solutions. If you do nothing else, sign up for the Bean to Barstool newsletter. You can do that by going to beantobarstool.com/newsletter-signup. That link is in the show notes. That is a weekly email newsletter that covers all the same things we cover here on the podcast. Speaking of, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Wherever you listen to Bean to Barstool, go there and subscribe to make sure you get notifications of new episodes. If you're a proud millennial like me and you still use an RSS feeder, you can also subscribe to our blog posts, which come out at least weekly. Also, if you are still on social media but don't love Meta right now, you can check me out over on Blue Sky. I'm on there under my personal account at David Nilsson Beer, but I do post all the Bean to Barstool content over there as well. Finally, if you want to get in touch with me directly, you can email beantobarstool@gmail.com. I am not leaving Instagram anytime soon, but these are great ways to make sure you can keep up with what I have going on. Stay safe and take care of each other.
Yeah, it's definitely eye-opening as well as like flavor opening. It opens your mind to things because I think a lot of times we're not even aware of what we're tasting because we live in such a hurried time that we don't really stop and savor moments. But I think when you do sometimes, then you go, oh my gosh, like I was thinking the other day, like every time I taste something coconutty, it reminds me of my a big sister of mine. And in the summertime, it evokes memories, doesn't it? So
Yeah, absolutely. Do you personally have a favorite beverage for pairing with chocolate?
pairing with chocolate, I probably would say whiskeys for sure. I've paired moonshines with them as well and rums, but maybe probably the whiskey. I remember one time we had some guys in here and they said, warm up the whiskey in your glass and cover it and then smell it, and it's smelling it like that was different than actually just smelling the glass. And then they had said, plug your nose and take a sip and then take a sip again, but unplug your nose.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so profound. And I thought that's really amazing. And we tried that with chocolate and it's so similar. It's hard to comprehend. And I think that's one thing that I think why we think our lavender bar is really fun to do tastings with, because oftentimes people will smell the lavender bar and they can't really smell the lavender in the bar. And then they put it on their tongue. And after like a minute or less, they'll go, this is so weird. I can smell that. I can smell that. And you go, yeah, isn't that amazing?
That's
But I
really
would say
cool.
but I would definitely say probably whiskeys. I think whiskeys is fun because it's both are very well crafted and both have a lot of love and time put into all the processes. Yeah, and when whiskey's sitting down there and you've got chocolate sitting down there, you taste the chocolate and then you taste the whiskey, you taste the whiskey and then you taste the chocolate and you go, this is mind blowing.
Well, it is so hard to slow down as a business owner, and with making chocolate every single day, and especially with the challenges that chocolate makers are facing right now with the cacao market, what keeps you excited? What keeps you in love with making chocolate?
Well, I never get tired, I think, of making chocolate, and it's partly because there's always something new, but also I think something that really makes me happy is our customers. I think it's our customers. We have a saying in here. Well, I say it, and that's that everything we make is a gift. And when you have a customer come in and like we have people that come in here sometimes and maybe a parent passed away and they have placed an order for gift baskets to be taken to the hospital or the care home as a thank you gift. I mean, you're just like, you're so chuffed and you think, I can't believe they picked us to say thank you like that. What an honor. Do you know? Also, it's like when people taste your chocolate and they've done a tour maybe and they can see all the work that you've put into it. And I think every bit of chocolate that every chocolate maker makes it's a bit of themselves they put into it. It's our heart and soul. And that's why I think I love going to chocolate festivals and you try different makers chocolate and it might be the same origin, but they've put their spin on it. And I think that's the beauty of craft chocolate being to bar made, because everything is thought out. It's thoughtful processes. But when your customers have a smile and they're happy and they bring their friends or they bring their children or their neighbors because they found something amazing and they want to share it. I mean, you're like, I'm just chuffed. I'm so thankful.
We've talked throughout here about the importance of story in what you're doing. What story are you telling with NearyNogs?
I suppose I hope that we're telling a story of traceability of where chocolate comes from. It doesn't just land on our it lands in our hands looking like that bar. Do you know farmers put their blood, sweat, and tears into growing it, cultivating it, keeping it safe, looking after it, harvesting it, fermenting it, making it, you know, good, making it beautiful, making it so that we know that when it gets to us, it's been well looked after. I think it tells a story of a community that cares, people that care more about just being in a hurry, taking our time to craft something beautiful and thoughtful and something that we're proud of. I think I'm really proud of our chocolate community and, people who have passion to share all the good that people are doing. It's supporting communities, not just, in a cacao community, but it's supporting our community here. It's offering jobs there, it's offering jobs here. And it's something that it's a gift, either it's a gift for yourself or it's a gift for someone that you really care about. And that's a lovely thing. So I hope it's telling a story of goodness and kindness. And yeah, and that, when we do this together as a collaboration, whether it's helping each other find good beans or good chocolate. I tell people if they're traveling to Norway, go see my friend Agur at Fiac Chocolate. If they're in Scotland, go see my friend Ali at Chocolate Tree. If you're in America, go see Goodnow Farms or French Broad Chocolate. People who care, go see, there's so many good chocolate makers, Hanbin from Public Chocolatory. I just think go see the community because it works and we work it together. And that's the story I want to tell.
Dorothy talked about tasting whiskey with your nose pinched shut and then without, and I want to talk about that for a minute because it illustrates something really cool about our senses of smell and taste. We often use the words flavor and taste interchangeably, but they actually refer to two different things. Taste is one component of what we call flavor, but because of the way the brain synchronizes our senses to make things simpler and more efficient for us, we often think our taste buds are doing everything. But let me explain how this works. Smells get processed in our olfactory bulb at the base of the brain. What we normally think of as smelling when we breathe in through our noses to detect aromas is called orthonasal olfaction, but it's not the only way we smell. And the second, known as retronasal olfaction, is the key to flavor. There's a passageway in the back of the throat that leads up to the olfactory bulb. This passageway is what allows us to pass air from our lungs to our nostrils and vice versa when we're breathing in through our nose, but it also plays a critical role in flavor perception. When we take a food or drink into our mouths, like that sip of whiskey Dorothy mentioned, or a bit of her excellent chocolate, aroma compounds from that food or drink travel up our retronasal passageway to our olfactory bulb, and then our brains do something really kind of weird. They make us believe we're tasting those aromas on our tongue. In reality, we only taste a few basic things with our taste buds. We've identified taste receptors for sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami, or savory. And scientists are becoming more certain we have the ability to taste fat as well. There might be a few more we haven't identified or proven, but regardless, our sense of taste is a lot more limited than we normally think. Everything else we detect, the thousands of flavors we can identify in food and drink, is informed by our sense of smell. To save us the cognitive trouble of consciously processing two senses at the same time, our brains just make us believe we're tasting it all. A great way to illustrate this is with flavored jelly beans. Pick a jelly bean at random without knowing the flavor and pinch your nose firmly shut. Put the jelly bean in your mouth and chew. Because your closed nostrils prevent air movement to and from the olfactory bulb, you're effectively cutting off your sense of smell, leaving you with only taste. And the only thing you should be able to taste in that jelly bean is sweetness and possibly some sourness, depending on the bean. Release your nose and you'll instantly get a flood of flavor, and you'll likely be able to identify it as cherry or watermelon or s'mores or whatever it is. It will feel like you're tasting it, but you've just proven you're smelling it. Doing both together is flavor. Another easy way to do this is by mixing some sugar with cinnamon. Pinch your nose closed and then put some of it on your tongue. You'll only taste the sugar, but when you release your nose, you'll smell the cinnamon and believe you're tasting it. This matters when we're tasting beer or chocolate or other treats because so many flavors have become linked to sweetness or other basic tastes in our brains because of this system. And these can even be culturally informed. In North America and Europe, we're very used to vanilla being used in desserts. So the presence of vanilla in a chocolate or beer can make it seem sweeter, even though the vanilla itself adds no sugar. Pinching your nose closed when you take your first bite or sip can help you evaluate how sweet or acidic a beer or chocolate is before your brain gets influenced by your sense of smell. Then you can release your nose and see how smell broadens the picture. It's pretty cool stuff. I'll include a link to the NearyNogs website in the show notes if you want to learn more about them, and you can also follow them on Instagram. I've got a fun chocolate and beer event coming up that I want to talk about real quick. On Saturday, May 31st, I will be working with Third Eye Brewing in Hamilton, Ohio, on an event called Chocolate, Beer, and Chocolate Beer. Third Eye Brewing has won multiple awards for their beers made with cacao. Typically, they've sourced that from Maverick Chocolate in Cincinnati. They may be working with another chocolate maker for a few batches coming up soon. But in this event, we're going to be tasting 2 of their award-winning chocolate beers. Then we'll be pairing 2 other beers with craft chocolate. So we'll get kind of this big picture of how chocolate and cacao can interact with beer, both on the brewing side and then on the pairing side. I will be leading that event along with Third Eye's award-winning brewmaster, Kelly Montgomery, a friend of mine. And those who attend the event will also get to stick around for a brewery tour afterwards. I will put links to the ticketing site in the show notes so you can check that out. That is on Saturday, May 31st. The next episode of Bean to Barstool is the 100th full-length episode of the show, and appropriately, we're bringing back an old friend of the show, Estelle Tracy. You know her as 37 Chocolates on Instagram. We've had her on here before to talk about pairing with wine. In the next episode, we will talk about pairing with wine and beer, since she started doing that some as well, and just generally discuss what we've been doing lately in the world of pairing and chocolate. And then the next episode after that, we'll be talking with Front Porch Chocolate from Montana. They make a number of bars that they developed specifically with beer pairing in mind, which is right up our alley. So we have a really fun conversation with them coming. Before I let you go, I want to talk about one quick chocolate bar that I had recently that is just perfect for this time of year, and I've been thinking about it constantly. Here in Ohio right now, it's late April. And despite what the calendar says, we are in the middle of our annual wrestling match between winter and spring. It can be 75 degrees and sunny one day, and then you get like a hard freeze the next night, and it's 35 the next day, and then it's raining for 3 days, and then it's 70 again, and it just bounces back and forth constantly. The flowers are up, the blooms are on the trees. I am worried for them because we inevitably get a few more frosts and freezes. A couple years back, we got 4 inches of snow at the beginning of May. So things can just be all over the place this time of year in the American Midwest. There is a chocolate bar I had recently from the other side of the world that just perfectly evoked this time of year for me. You are maybe tired of hearing me talk about Sisters A chocolate from Ukraine. They are one of the, for my money, one of the best chocolate makers in the world right now, and I'm not going to stop talking about them anytime soon. Their strawberries and basil bar is amazing, and as soon as I smelled it and tasted it, it felt perfect for this time of year. It's earthy and green, but still cool. You get flavors of unripe berries, pale grass, cool shade, green garden herbs, and the image that came to my mind as I was tasting the bar was of having your fingers in the soil in spring in the garden when it's still slightly chilled, but you've got that promise of warmer days ahead. This is one of the best bars I've had in a while from, like I said, one of the best makers in the world right now. If you have the opportunity to get chocolate bars from Sisters A, I highly recommend you do that, as well as another great Ukrainian maker in Stranger Chocolate. If you go on the Bean to Barstool blog, I have posts up about both of those makers, and they are stories worth reading now more than ever. Thanks to Dorothy for coming on the show today, and to all of you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Bean to Barstool.